Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Hello everybody and welcome to round 6 of the Radical Racing Challenge here on Apex Racing TV. I can't believe it myself, we're already halfway through the season. We've seen some interesting racing, definitely some exciting racing throughout this season, and hopefully tonight will be no different. We're at Circuito de Jerez in Spain, home of the Formula 1 European Grand Prix, the last race that Formula 1 held here in 1997, which was of course remembered for the dramatic crash that Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher had on this course. That'll be interesting. That was a very controversial crash, but hopefully there's no controversy tonight. I'm your host, Ron Mullins. Joining me is J.R. Gregory with Joshua Wilkie in the virtual production hauler. Now, J.R., this is certainly an interesting track. You've seen some of the other drivers drive around this track throughout the session so far this week here on iRacing, and I know you personally don't have the strongest view of this car and track combination, and how about you explain that for some of the viewers tonight?
Well, you know, it's not terrible, Ron, and we should probably be quite upfront and let our viewers know that there is only one split today. We normally get the top of 3 or 4 splits and have a pretty tight field. We're not going to see that today. We've got a 13-car field in the single split, and that can be typical of newer tracks that they have just brought to the service and are trying to break in. But Jerez, I suppose. You know, one of the kind of painful things about driving on this track is the chicane. There are a couple of configurations. There's the what we have here today, I believe it's called the Grand Prix chicane. Grand Prix configuration, pardon me, and the Moto configuration I think is the one that people prefer because it is a flowing track with a lot of sweepers, a couple low-speed hairpins, and you see this Larson here in car 4 going through that chicane right now, and it kind of just breaks up the character of the track. And also in my own experience on this track, it's very, very hard on tires. Unlike some of the tracks that we've visited over the last couple of weeks, the tires don't really get a breather. There's no long straightaways. They're either grinding hard through those long sweepers or understeering through the low-speed corners, hard on the brakes. So tire management may rear its head as we watch this one unfold.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely be the case. We have seen tire management come into an effect throughout this season. Hasn't come into effect as much as I think it will tonight. As you said, there's not really a point where these tires can have a rest. Most of the time, they're just screaming in agony as these drivers haul these Radical SR10s around some of these corners. And I think you brought up a good point with that chicane. This was one of the tracks that was modified in the light of Ayrton Senna's death in 1994 to slow down certain courses. They had one at Spa going through a Rouge and Radion, which is probably one of the worst chicanes ever seen in motorsports history. We're seeing Sam Fitzpatrick, Apex Racing TV's own Sam Fitzpatrick, driving through there. We actually have two of our Apex Racing TV commentators who just got off of the ARA Formula 3 broadcast. We've got Aaron Smith, who actually broadcasted the series with me last season, so now he's in the driver's seat tonight. And we have Sam Fitzpatrick, who we're following now, who's about to cross the line, and I believe he stays towards the back of the field. He goes up to 7th, doesn't improve his time, and moves ahead of Robert Woodward, so we're following Aaron Smith now. But getting back to the point of the chicane, it's actually named after Ayrton Senna, even though the chicane was really added in the light of his death, which to me doesn't seem like the most touching tribute in the world. It's like if NASCAR decided to name the safer barrier that they introduced in the light of Dale Earnhardt's death, the Earnhardt barrier. So not the smartest decision to me there, and to be honest, I don't really have too much of a fun time driving around that chicane. You did see that a lot in courses, because chicane design is very interesting. It's very finicky too. You have some chicanes that are just absolutely beautiful, like the chicane towards the end of the track at Road Atlanta. That's personally one of my favorite chicanes in all of motorsports because it's a great overtaking opportunity, and it's also very fun to drive around. The track here, I think it has, it adds really bad flow. It has such bad flow, probably got jumped at a rap battle, so we'll see these drivers, I wouldn't say navigate, more sort of negotiate through there, especially with the killer curbs that you can't really see because they are disguised in like AstroTurf green, so we'll see those drivers go through that chicane tonight. Only 10 drivers have set a qualifying time so far, and Aaron Smith, it looks like he will be one of the last drivers to set a qualifying time, so this will be 11. We have 13 drivers enter tonight, which is the lowest entry we've seen for any race so far this season, but hopefully with a small field, it doesn't mean it's a bad and uncompetitive field. We'll just have to wait and see how the racing is tonight. Very harsh words I said there. I might get in trouble for that, but oh well.
Yeah, and those qualifying times are quite spread out. I think there's a second bracketing the top 5 qualifiers, and by the time you get down to P11, it's as you can see there on the graphic, it's 2.5 seconds from P1 to P10 on the grid. So this field is going to spread out pretty quickly, and we may not see the kind of bumping and grinding that we've enjoyed over the last weeks.
It's Andreas Frederick on pole tonight with Jorge Gonzaga in 2nd, Kimi André Bjorklund in 3rd, Gordon Haug in 4th, Kettle Larson in 5th, Samir Kadora in 6th. We haven't seen him too much this season. Sam Fitzpatrick, Apex Racing TV's own, in 7th, Robert Woodward in 8th, Mika Holkinen in 9th position. We have Damian Struthers, I apologize for that, in 10th. We have Aaron Smith in 11th, Kevin Smith. We have an all-Smith 6th row there, blocking out that row. And then we have Luca Clementi, who did not set a time in qualifying. Last 3 starters on this grid did not set a qualifying time. Maybe they're confident in their chances. Maybe they just decide to go use the bathroom before the start of this race. We've got 15 laps ahead of us on a very interesting track. We still have some drivers have yet to line up on the grid. You can see that missing space in the middle of the field there, so we'll just have to wait and see for that driver to load in. We don't have too much time for them to load in. Maybe it's just some mental games that they're trying to play here. We have seen a bit of mental warfare come into effect in these races, so we'll have to see if that's what that driver is doing there.
Yeah, they're showing up now. You got to wonder if a couple of these drivers might elect to start from the pits now. They're on the grid now. All right, here we go.
Here we go. It was actually our Apex Racing TV co-commentators that were the last to show up. Fashionably late, I'd say. We're going to get the 5 lights out, and the drivers will be on their way. It's a pretty medium-sized start into turn 1. That was a fantastic start there from Sam Fitzpatrick. He already jumps up to 5th, but that's a pretty even-keel start between Andres Friedrich and Jorge Gonzaga, but Gonzaga looks to try and pull off the move on Friedrich for the lead as they go through the first series of corners there. Gonzaga was pretty much ahead there of Friedrich as they went into turn 1, but unfortunately was not able to pull off that move, and Friedrich maintains the lead, and behind him it's Gonzaga in second and Bjorklund, who are currently battling, and then Sam Fitzpatrick, who actually now makes it up into third but then drops back. It'll be interesting to see some of these drivers try and go for around the outside overtakes, as we've seen, and also some inside overtakes as well. So pretty good start there from Sam Fitzpatrick. Certainly a good start there from Andreas Friedrich, who maintains the lead after starting this race from the pole. Well, that's a big dive bomb we see back there. I believe that was Woodward. Woodward is dropping back. He definitely had some kind of incident there. That's a tough break for him. He must have spun out. Tough break for him. We haven't seen too much of him in this season, so it's good to see him out tonight. He is currently down in 11th of the 12 drivers that are currently on track.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the other features, I guess you could say, of this track is there are a couple of low-speed corners that are going to invite the dive bomb, and we'll get the track map up here in a little bit and talk about those. But we're going to see some strong defense and probably some strong offense. Here's one of them right here as they come around and get ready to re-enter the front straight. This is down in first or second gear in the GT cars here.
Yeah, this will be very interesting. The biggest battle, I believe, on track right now is between Jorge Gonzaga and Kimi Andre and Bjorklund. These drivers are battling. We saw some interesting shuffling going on there from Gonzaga. Coming into the final corner, he was very close trying to defend from Bjorklund. We're going to get a replay here, I believe, of a incident. I believe that was the incident where Robert Woodward dropped back. We'll get a replay here. He is going in. He was running in 5th, so that was a fantastic start from him as well. So he is the number 10 car there. Went for the dive bomb. I had a bad feeling about that dive bomb when I saw it, and unfortunately for him, and I believe Aaron Smith as well, got caught up in that. Tough break for those drivers. That was Samir Kadora who did that dive bomb, which definitely wasn't the smartest move into that corner. Tried to emulate Michael Schumacher when he went for the dive bomb on Jacques Villeneuve going into that corner. Really, well, Schumacher tried to bump him out of the race to try and win the championship. I doubt Kadora was trying to take out his competitors, but that was certainly not the smartest move there, especially this early in the race. We are only on lap 1 of a 15-lap race, so to go for a dive bomb that far back at this stage of the race, you got to question what kind of herbal supplements they were having smoked before they decide to go for that move. So anyway, jokes like that notwithstanding, we're back to the battle towards the front here. This is a battle between Kimi Andre and Bjorklund, who are following, who's currently running in 3rd, right behind Jorge Gonzaga. This will be interesting. One thing that we have seen a lot of in this series that we won't see a lot of tonight is drivers trying to break the slipstream. We've seen in this series how big of an effect slipstream can play into some of these races, but at a track like this, where the main straightaway that you're seeing these drivers traverse now is really the only big straightaway on this track. Well, I say that, there's also the back straightaway, but you know, we don't really count that. We'll do, actually, there's real 3 straightaways, we'll say. We'll see the main start-finish straight, the small little straights right after the Ayrton Senna chicane going into the final corner, and then the straightaway on the back side of the circuits. But rule of 3s for comedy's sakes, it's not really 3 straightaways. One of them is a lot shorter than the other 2, but still, this is something that we might... I mean, we've seen a lot of slipstream-related overtakes, but at a track like this where there's not too many straightaways, I don't think we'll see much of that tonight, but we are seeing a pass there, or attempted pass. Gordon Howe goes really deep there and actually hits Kadora, so that might be a bit of karma for Kadora after he punted a few of his drivers, punted a few of his fellow competitors out on lap 1. It looks like Kadora, it didn't look like there was too much contact there. It looked like it might have just been a bit of... just iRacing being like, yeah, this driver's there when they're really like a foot off and just spinning them around. It's a tough break for those drivers there, but right now, back up at the front, this will be an interesting battle to watch. This will be obviously interesting for the final 12 laps of this race. What battle do you think we should focus on there, JR?
Well, I think you're right. Friedrich clearly is driving off at this point. He's already developed a 3-second gap after 3 laps. So my math isn't that good. That could put him ahead by as much as 15 by the end of this one. Bjorklund is all over Gonzaga here. Speaking of the draft, it obviously plays a huge factor in some of the bigger tracks, not so much here. However, we may see it come into effect on that back straight because unlike the front straight, where you're coming off a very low speed first or second gear corner, the back street, which we're approaching now here as we ride along with Bjorklund, you come onto it in a pretty high speed third gear sweeper here. So they're on the power here, accelerating onto this longish back straight. So we may see a little bit of draft and pass right here on the corner that we're approaching with Bjorklund.
That'll be fascinating to see if any slipstream passes develop. It's definitely got to be something to look out for. I know from the tracks that we've had so far this season, tracks like the Nordschleife, which has one of the biggest straightaways in all of racing, obviously, you're going to see a lot of slipstream passes there. Well, we saw at a track like that, we actually saw drivers getting overtaken and then being able to overtake the car back. It was that long of a straightaway, so I don't think we'll see that kind of action here tonight, but it'll be interesting to see how the slipstream plays an effect in this race. Something else that'll be very intriguing as this race develops is these two drivers here, Gonzaga and Bjorklund. They've been battling throughout most of this race. Gonzaga, they've still maintained second and third between these drivers, but what we saw last lap was we saw Andreas Friedrich was about a second faster than these two drivers, and I believe this will be the case this time, this lap as well. We're going to see the laps here. Friedrich sets a 137.2, and yeah, Gonzaga and Bjorklund are at a 138.2 and a 138.3, so those drivers are dropping back quite significantly. I was going to mention how Sam Fitzpatrick was actually starting to close up on some of these drivers as well, but he actually had a slower lap there. I believe he's now, well, actually, no, I say that he's... Actually, no, I lied. I got confused on the live timing there. You can tell I definitely need a new set of glasses. This prescription is out of date. Fitzpatrick is currently in the midst of a battle there with Haug. Gordon Haug, who's currently running in 5th, so that'll be interesting to see those drivers battle. You can see that in the background. There's a great camera shot going down that back straightaway. You can see these drivers starting to battle. Gordon Haug looking for a way to get around Fitzpatrick. Started the race down 7th, I believe. Had a fantastic start and managed to get up into 4th and has stayed there ever since lap 1. So it'll be intriguing to see Gordon Haug try and find a way past Fitzpatrick. And a track like this where you have a lot of corners where the dirty air comes into an effect and not too many areas where the slipstream plays a big role, where do you think is the best overtaking opportunity if you're Haug trying to get past Fitzpatrick?
Well, as I said, I think I like that last corner coming off the back straight. It keys, of course, on getting a solid exit out of that third gear right-hander leading onto that back straightaway. But I think that is a very good place to stay close, take advantage of the draft, and get a pretty nice wide entry at the right-hander at the end of that back straight as well. So that's where I would be looking for both Bjorklund to take a look at Gonzaga, and now Haug has taken another bite out of Fitzpatrick's lead now. It got it down to under 0.3. He's looking pretty racy, and he might be seeing a move out of him here in the very near future.
Is definitely looking racy at this point in the race. He was about a 1/10 of a second faster than Fitzpatrick, and you can see that gap is really low. I believe this time last lap it was about a 1/4 of a second between those drivers, and they were still pretty close, all things considered, by the time they got to the end of the back straightaway. So we're going to see them on the back straightaway now. So you can see the mile an hour at the corner of your screen with Haug. We've seen how being in the slipstream can increase your top speed by about 15 miles an hour on certain tracks. So it'll be, I don't think we'll see as strong of an effect at a track like this, where that back straightaway is the only real slipstream spot on this entire circuit, but it'll still be something to look out for. And something else to look out for is Larson now closing in on this battle between Fitzpatrick and Haug. Right now, these drivers are all pretty close. I believe Haug is very close. Well, Haug and Larson are very close to each other. So that might be the battle to look out for. There's another battle that we've been looking at for all race. It's a battle between Gonzaga and Bjorklund. I believe Bjorklund has just been kind of stuck behind. He might be getting a bit impatient, but I will say one thing as well. We saw the gap between first and second a few laps ago was at about 4 seconds. If you look at the gap right now, it's about 2.8, so it could be. We mentioned earlier in the broadcast how the tire management game at a track like this where the tires are getting tortured, for lack of a better word, we could see how tire management could come into an effect. And look at that, Friedrich managed to set a 139.8 compared to Gonzaga, who set a 138.1. So that was a big chunk that Gonzaga took out of the time there. So Friedrich must have made a mistake. We're going to get a replay from Josh to see what happened there. For Andreas Friedrich, he's going down the back straightaway here. He might have just had a big lock up here. Very susceptible to do that, running over the curb there, and just goes really wide. Oh no, had a small little slide there. That's what shot that gap down. That's what made that gap sink like a lead balloon there. But it looks like Friedrich has actually recovered. Scratched pretty much all I said about how the tire management could come into an effect. I say that, we're still only halfway through this race, so anything can happen, really. But it was just a simple mistake there from Friedrich. Friedrich has raced in the series quite a lot. We've also seen some occasional mistakes from him, but he's usually a fairly clean driver. So in a course like this, however, where tires are screaming in pain, you're really at the limit of grip, you can see more mistakes, and especially in a car like this where the drivers are still skating a little bit. I know in my experience driving this car, it's certainly not the easiest to drive in the world, but right now we're seeing a battle that's very close. There's actually contact there between Haug and Larson. That was very close as they battled through the center chicane.
Yeah, and our boy Fitzpatrick getting a break here. Haug getting quite a bit of pressure there from behind by Larson. A little bit of overlap, and all of a sudden Haug had his sights set on Fitzpatrick. Now he's going to watch his rear view for hard-charging Kjetil Larson.
That'll be very close. That'll definitely be a big battle to watch as this race develops. But another big battle we're seeing here towards the back of the field now. We're seeing a battle between Damian Struthers, who started towards the back of the pack, and I believe that is Smith. It's not Aaron Smith, however, it is Kevin Smith, who I believe we have seen a couple times throughout the season. We haven't seen him too much. He's not really a big fixture in the series. And right now, these drivers are pretty matched on lap time. You can see about 0.4 of a second, a little less than 0.4 of a second, closer to 3.5 tenths between those two drivers. So it'll be nice to see how this battle develops. Right now, these are the last runners. Right now, as Robert Woodward has pulled off of the pits. He was involved in that incident earlier, and I believe he might have had some kind of accident, but I believe he might have just called it an evening here at a track and car combination that has not proved to be popular. You say that in a couple seasons' time when a lot more people are owning this track, because I believe this track only came into the iRacing service 2 seasons ago. As we're seeing Haug, he made a mistake coming through there and manages to get overtaken there by Kjetil Larson there. That is a pass for position for P5, so Larson moves himself into the top 5. But getting back to the point I was going to make, although we do have a fairly pitiful entry list for tonight, for lack of a better term, I think in a couple seasons, if we do continue driving this track, and hopefully we move to the moto layout so we don't have to negotiate, well, so the drivers don't have to negotiate that chicane, we'll just have to see if this car and track combination will become popular in the next few seasons. I know the people, the community for the Radicals here on iRacing will definitely be working hard on next season's schedule, and I'm looking forward to it. We've had a fantastic schedule so far this season. We've put on some very interesting races, and although I personally have some qualms about the specific track layout that we're using the Grand Prix layout instead of the Moto, we're seeing some very interesting battle, and this the big battle that we've seen throughout this race. But we haven't seen a change of position, though. We've seen Gonzaga and Bjorklund really run nose to tail throughout most of this race, but Bjorklund closed up a lot in the braking zone there, so it'll be nice to see if we can see some action in this battle here.
Yeah, Bjorklund is not done at all. He's not going to be satisfied with P3. You can see him measuring up Gonzaga, sticking with him, getting in Gonzaga's head the best he can. He may just be waiting for a mistake, maybe measuring up his opportunity. Great camera work here by our producer Josh, showing us the entry into our favorite section of the track, the chicane, as we approach pit entry and that final hairpin leading onto the front straight.
You can see the graphic in the corner of the screen. You can see the gap between Kim Andre Bjorklund and Sam Fitzpatrick. they've actually spread apart quite a lot. We saw how Sam was closing up quite a lot, then he started dropping back a little bit, then closed in a little bit, then started dropping back. You could see the, I believe that was lap 9 or 10. That was a big drop-off for Fitzpatrick. The gap between those two, it's now about 5 seconds. So that was interesting. He must have made a mistake there because he was kind of in a league of his own. He was about 6 seconds behind the lead. He was about 6 seconds off the lead, about 2 seconds off of these two drivers. And then he was about, God, it had to have been about 3 or 4 seconds ahead of the battle between Larson and Haug, between the drivers running in 5th and 6th. And now Fitzpatrick is in the midst of that battle, so it'll be interesting to see how Fitzpatrick can hold off that charge. I know he holds himself very high as a commentator. We'll have to see him flex his muscles as a racer if he wants to hold on to that 4th position. It looks like Gonzaga is not going to be able to hold on to 2nd here. Kim-Andre Bjorklund looks for the move coming off of that back straightaway and into the hairpin there, but unfortunately he does not get the move done there. But you can see as certainly the patience of these drivers is starting to fray a little bit as the laps tick down. We're on lap 10 of 13. We're on lap 10 of 15 in this race. You can tell my glasses prescription is still very up to date as I misread 5 as 3. But right now we're seeing some. This will be an intriguing battle as this race develops. The patience of these drivers is certainly starting to wane, and I'm sure Bjorklund is getting sick of seeing the back of Gonzaga's car, and I believe we saw some battling behind those drivers. We're seeing some more battling between these two. Bjorklund goes down the inside of Jorge Gonzaga there at the final corner. They're still side by side, just barely coming out of the final corner, so it looks like Gonzaga is going to try and go for the move again, going down the inside of turn 1 on lap 11 here. So we'll see possibly another change of position in just 2 corners, and right now we're seeing the battle farther behind us. Bjorklund and Gonzaga continue to swap positions. This was a big swap-a-roo. We had Fitzpatrick, who was in 4th, dropped down to 5th, and now he got overtaken by Haug, and now he's running in 6th. So we saw a big fall-off there from Fitzpatrick. He was about probably 4 or 5 seconds, 3 or 4 or 5 seconds ahead of these drivers, and now he's currently behind the both of them, so we'll have to see some heroics here from Sam Fitzpatrick if he wants to get into the top 5 again, let alone maintain the position he had up at the front of that queue. So right now we're seeing the battle continue here between Gonzaga and Bjorklund. That was some nice shuffling that we saw there. Right as I mentioned how it'd be interesting to see some action between those drivers, we saw it there, JR.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looked like there was a pretty good 3-car train back behind with Larson, Haug, and Fitzpatrick. And Fitzpatrick, I think he's still up 1 from his grid position, but he got such a good start. And sometimes when that happens, you end up driving a little bit over your head, and it's only a matter of time before the quicker drivers reel you in and put you back behind him. And I think that's what has happened to Sam here this afternoon.
I've got to wonder if tire management came into an effect there, because we saw, as you said, he had a fantastic start and then sort of just dropped back like a rock as he's now trying to find every way. That was a very interesting interpretation of track limits as they went to the final corner there. Fitzpatrick was basically, well, he had all 4 tires pretty much entirely off the track there and probably had a spare room for a dog next to him, so that was very close there. That was very strange there from Fitzpatrick. That's a very interesting interpretation of track limits. That's a very big slide as he goes down the inside of Haug. That was a bold move there from Fitzpatrick, but I believe he's going to be stuck on the outside, so unless he carries a big load of speed coming through here and has to carry his balls in a wheelbarrow there as he holds on and stays around the outside and gets a position done there on Gordon Haug. That was very good stuff there from Sam Fitzpatrick, but it looks like he's going to be challenged again by Haug, who's going to have the inside line as they go down the back straightaway and go into the hairpin here. We've seen some battles here. We've seen some interesting moves, and we see Haug get past Fitzpatrick again, but it's not done yet, I believe. Actually, it might be, as Fitzpatrick pulls in behind Haug. He pulled off a fantastic move there, but probably the worst place to pull off a move, because as soon as he got past, Haug had the perfect opportunity to slipstream past as they went down the back straightaway, and we just saw that there.
Oh, and there goes Hauger almost around. Oh, my goodness.
I think he beached himself on the curb there.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he beached himself on the curb there. That was, I mentioned earlier in the broadcast how as we're seeing them go through the Senna chicane there, those killer curbs on the inside. And that was strange from Gordon Haug. His car, it looked like his car decided to dance a jig on the other curb as they went down there, but now St. Fitzpatrick's car is dancing a jig as he had a big moment there coming through the final corner, so he's now going to be stuck side by side again with Haug. It looks like he got the move done last lap, then he got overtaken again, and then he got by Haug again, and now he's looking to get by and hold his position from Haug, who's challenging after Fitzpatrick had that big snap of oversteer as he went through the final corner, but he still holds on to the 5th position. While this was going on, that was some very spirited battles between those two drivers. Larson is pulled away, so unless something major happens, it looks like Fitzpatrick is going to stay just barely in the top 5 and maybe outside the top 5, because I think Larson is just driven away at this stage of the race. And right now we're seeing Hulkinen, who's run 7th. He's had a quiet race, all things considered. He was about 3 seconds gap back of this battle here, and now he's actually about a second, so that's another big moment there from Sam Fitzpatrick, who has a big lock up there and gets a bit loose coming through that corner there, and he loses a position again to Gordon Haug. So these two are continuing to battle. We don't have much time left in this race, but I think if these drivers continue to battle as hard as we've seen these past 2 laps, we could see Hulkinen get involved in this fight.
Without a doubt. And Hulkinen is kind of rubbing his hands together and licking his lips right now as Haug and Fitzpatrick are fighting hard. We talked about tire management, and these two are putting everything on the track side by side, trying to late break each other, trying to get the fast exits. And I can't imagine that their tires are very happy with what they're being put through right now. And that is going to give Hulkinen an opportunity to close that gap and maybe be within striking distance here in the final laps.
Some fantastic stuff that we're seeing here, and it's a battle it's just a battle for the last top 5 position. Right now we've seen some battles all throughout this field. We saw a battle for the final top 10 position, which unfortunately has fizzled out as Smith had some kind of issue that has dropped him back well behind Struthers, but now we're seeing some battling up at the front that we've seen throughout this race. Gonzaga is still running in second, right ahead of Kim Andre and Bjorklund, and right now Bjorklund has dropped back a little bit. I don't think he'll be able to get the move done on Jorge Gonzaga there as they go down the back straightaway and into the hairpin there. That we've seen some very interesting stuff so far. We've seen some very fantastic racing. I didn't have the highest hopes coming into this race with a low entry list and a track that really doesn't promote the best of racing in the world, but we've put on a fantastic show. And if you'd like to join us on this, you can either watch the broadcast here on Apex Racing TV, always on Fridays, I believe 1900 GMT. Actually, no, I believe it's 2100 GMT, or you can join us on iRacing itself. We always carry the top split of the Radical Racing Challenge here on the iRacing service and broadcast it here on Apex Racing TV for our fans to enjoy and for the community. And it's really just a thanks for them, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to put these broadcasts and these fantastic races on. So we're seeing some very interesting stuff here, and hopefully we'll see some more interesting stuff as we go to Silverstone next week, and we're on the white flag lap. It looks like Andreas Friedrich will take a fairly commanding win. He had a small little mistake there, but besides that, he's run a pretty flawless race. But this is an interesting battle that we'll have to follow as this last lap develops. Gonzaga and Bjorklund. Bjorklund is probably sick and tired of seeing the back of Gonzaga's Radical SR10. He has been stuck behind it pretty much throughout this entire race. His radiator is probably screaming in pain. It's been getting hot air off the back of Gonzaga's car. He probably wants just a whiff of clean air. So I think we might see some interesting stuff here from Bjorklund. He's a bit closer than he was last lap, only about a couple of tenths between these drivers, but Bjorklund is closing up quite a lot. Looks like he goes for the move. Looks like he's going to go for the move, but it doesn't actually materialize for him. He was just way too far back, so unless Gonzaga makes a mistake in the final series of corners, which at a track like this, which doesn't really treat you very kindly if you do make a mistake, we'll have to see if Andreas Friedrich, who we're following now, wins. It'll probably be him taking the win as he enters the Ayrton Senna chicane for the final time. We'll have to see if Gonzaga can hold off that P2 position and stay ahead of Kimi Andre and Bjorklund, who he stayed behind throughout most of this race. But Andreas Friedrich, this man has put together a pretty much flawless race. He started from the pole, and he's going to come around the final corner and take the win. But this is the battle we want to see here between Kim Andre and Bjorklund, who goes down the inside. A very desperate move there from Gonzaga. It was too little too late. So it looks like Andreas Friedrich takes the win tonight, but it looks like it's going to be Jorge Gonzaga and Kimi Andrean Bjorklund who finish second and third. That was very close between those drivers. Kettle Larson finishes in fourth. Sorry, my voice cut out there. Sam Fitzpatrick finishes in fifth, but this is a close battle. Hulkinen managed to get ahead of Haug. We completely missed out on that battle, but that was just that just showed you the fantastic stuff that we had up towards the front. And Gordon Haug finishes in the 7th position, so he ended up losing that 6th place run that looked pretty much all but assured as he battled. We're going to get a replay here to see what happened between those two drivers.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Haug had it. We were watching that train of Haug, Hulken, and Fitzpatrick. Haug had an off and kind of busted up that battle. You're seeing the tail end of it there as Haug comes back onto the track. But yeah, that cost him some positions. And here we are. Yeah, we're going to see Haug here over-rotating maybe a little here. Ends up in the dirt. Yeah, just goes a little wide. Hot tires at the end of the race. He'll find himself in the sand and find himself down 2 positions after fighting that tough fight for the majority of the race. Wow, that's a bummer for Haug.
Hot worn tires and low weight because of the low fuel ended up costing Haug a pretty much guaranteed top 5 run. So that's a tough break for him as he ended up in the kitty litter on the final lap and drops down to 7th. Here's your final results here from tonight's race here on Apex Racing TV for the Radical Racing Challenge here at Jerez. It's Andreas Friedrich takes a fairly commanding win from the pole position. He holds on to win by about 8.5 seconds over Jorge Gonzaga and Kimi Andrean Bjorklund, who were involved in a fantastic fight throughout a majority of this race. They end up in 2nd and 3rd, completing your podium. We have Kettle Larson finished in 4th. He was really not involved in a battle. He was kind of just running in a league of his own, and then he eventually pulls into that battle and eventually finishes in 4th, so it's a very good race from him. Sam Fitzpatrick, who started down in 7th, made it up to 4th and drops down to 6th, I believe he was, and then actually makes it up back to 5th after Gordon Haug had that mistake on the final lap, so he finishes at 5th. Mika Hulkinen, who had a fairly quiet race, wasn't really involved in that battle until the last lap, and then he ends up taking the 6th position over Gordon Haug, who had that mistake on the final lap. He ends up in 7th. Samir Kadora, who had a strange incident on lap 1, he went for a overly opportunistic dive bomb there and unfortunately took Robert Woodward out of the race. So tough break for him. Aaron Smith, who used to commentate this race with me last season, he ends up in 9th, so maybe the criticisms he leveled on some of those drivers last season maybe wasn't the smartest thing in the world as he finishes 9th tonight. We have Damian Struthers, who ends up in P10. Kevin Smith ends up in P11. And your final 2 drivers who did not see the checkered flag, Robert Woodward, who was taken out in lap 1, and then Luca Clementi, who did not take the start. So tough break for him. He probably just decided to, I don't know, either have a beer instead of racing tonight, or he was just stuck on the toilet trying to squeeze off something that he had a couple nights ago. So tough break for those drivers who did not finish this race anywhere close to the lead lap. So tough break for those drivers, but a very interesting race that we saw. Poop jokes and weed jokes and criticism about the chicane that I still have iffy feelings on. That was a very interesting race there, JR. What do you think?
Yeah, it's we definitely saw some great. Maybe we might want to drag Sam in here. It was great to see Fitzpatrick get a really hot start and get involved in some really outstanding kind of side-by-side driving, and that's one of the fun things about these radicals is these. They have a pretty tight-knit community. I think these drivers drive together frequently. They know each other well, and they drive with trust for each other. And you really saw that in some of this epic side-by-side dicing, particularly between Fitzpatrick and Haug, I think it was. And driver name of the day, I'm going to go out on a limb and give to Mika Hulkinen. If that's not a race car driver's name, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it is a pretty good name, I will say. So that was some interesting stuff. I believe Sam Fitzpatrick is he's in the general now, so he'll have to move himself to the interview waiting area. He doesn't really have to do that. I just want to give him a hard time. But we have Jorge Gonzaga waiting for an interview, so we'll drag him in here. He had a very interesting race. Held off Kimi Andrean Bjorklund throughout a majority of this race, and we'll get to hear from him now. with an interview here, Gonzaga, you were involved in that fantastic battle there with Kim Andre and Bjorklund throughout a majority of this race and managed to hold off that position. How's the race from your end?
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, Kim is super fast, I must admit. And I had to find the perfect balance between not wasting the tires and staying in front of him. But yeah, it was amazing. Like, Kim is a really good rival. We race in several leagues, and he's proper fast. So I can consider myself lucky to stay ahead of him today. Yeah.
I can imagine that he was a bit annoyed towards the end of the race that he was stuck behind you for so long. He probably has the image of the back of your car just embedded into his memory. He'll probably be having nightmares about that for weeks to come. So, as you mentioned, it was tough to hold him off throughout most of that race, but you did obviously do that and did flawlessly. We did see a few tussles for position there between you two, I believe. I think we might have seen a couple of mistakes there. I believe you got loose a couple times coming through the hairpin at the end of the back straightaway. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but at a track like this, which is pretty hard to nail because there's so many chances to make a mistake, how hard was it to really put together a flawless race tonight?
That's the thing. I think from lap 12, the car completely transforms. Like, there's absolutely no grip on the tires, so the driving changes completely. You need to be really soft, and that was the whole focus throughout the race. I had to find that compromise of being fast but not pushing too much for the car, and I think that's why I managed to get a bit of a gap of 0.8 at some point, and then he would cut up to me immediately because I was trying to get a breather. Okay, let me save my tires for the end of the race because I knew he was going to push. And look, in the end of the day, I know it's frustrating for the person on the back, but it is racing, and it was fair racing, to be honest. I tried to give him as much space. There was that almost like side by side on 2 and 3, but I think it went really well. We're both respectful and how. I need to admit, on the last corner, on the last lap, I did close a bit because I knew he was going to try. But it's defending, it's racing, it's part of it. But still, if I would see that he would have a chance, like a very clear chance, I would obviously let him go. But I felt I was confident. I knew I had good pace. I knew I had fresher tires than he did because he kept pushing all the time. So, it was a gamble and it paid off. Yeah.
I will say that at a track like this, confidence is definitely a driver's greatest virtue, and it could come into an effect next week in Silverstone. We hope to see you there. If you are going to be racing with us next week, how do you fancy your chances at Silverstone?
Well, I don't know. To be honest, I haven't driven on the actual, I think 1 or 2 seasons ago, there was the old layout of Silverstone, so I haven't driven the Radical there for a while. I don't know, it's always a surprise, right? But I think it's all about practice, and to be honest, because unfortunately, there's so little attendance this week, maybe that's a great opportunity to start practicing for Silverstone, but yeah, I don't know, I like the track. A couple of weird corners that I can never get it straight, but let's see how it goes. On Tuesday, we'll know how confident I'll feel. Yeah.
It's definitely going to be an interesting race. And you mentioned when I asked you the second question about how the car felt pretty much completely different after lap 12. Me and JR were mentioning in the early part of this broadcast how tire management could play a pretty big effect. Were we correct in that assumption tonight?
Yeah, that was exactly it. That's why I knew if I could stay along the 38.4s, 38.2s, I knew I could have a good pace to at least get the distance from the the 4th place, and I think it was Kjetil that he was getting closer. So I didn't want to really go into the 37s because I knew I would just cook the tires. So that was the whole thing. It was a game of patience, trying to keep consistency, hitting the markers, not pushing too much on the longer corners. To try to save the tires, and I knew that on the last laps that's where it would pay off because I knew Kim would attack on the last end, on the end of the race, and like he did, and I think that's it. It's all about tire management on these tracks with longer, faster corners. And I think Silverstone will be another example. Laguna Seca last week was the same. The new tire model line iRacing is very different. So yeah, tire management is a massive part of driving the car now, and I think that makes it exciting, to be honest, and more realistic and with more immersion. So I think that's positive.
I'll tell you, regardless of the entry lists and how many drivers show up to these races, it's always fantastic, and we always put on some fantastic racing, and it's always great to commentate here on Apex Racing TV. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, and you put on a fantastic drive. Anyone you'd like to give thanks to or shout out?
To all the radical community, we're strong. We had a bit of a weird path last season with the build of the car. The community there was a bit of a civil war, but we managed to overcome. And this season, you can really see on the numbers of drivers on the races. Unfortunately, this week is a bit lower, but I think it's a combination of factors with vacation and the Spa 24. So, to the community, they all do a great job. All the leagues, Radical Racing Series and Radical Sim Racing, Sandro, Daryl, Martina, they all were, and a lot more that I'm not mentioning here, but they all do a great job continuing this community, and I'm glad that it's growing day by day. Yep.
They always do a fantastic job, and if it wasn't for the community, we wouldn't be able to put these broadcasts on. All right, Gonzaga, thank you very much for joining us. You put on a fantastic drive, and hope to see you next week at Silverstone, my friend.
Yeah, hope so. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
There was your second place finisher for tonight. He put together a pretty good drive holding off Kim Andre and Bjorklund, Jorge Gonzaga, who finishes second tonight. So I believe we don't have any more interviews, but I will say we have a lot more action coming up here on Apex Racing TV in the coming days. I know we were joking about Sam Fitzpatrick throughout this race, but I do the broadcast with him for the ARL GT3 trophy, which will have its second round of the season at Fuji this upcoming Tuesday the 25th. So that'll be a very interesting race. We had an interesting race this past week at Spa in conjoints with the Spa 24, so that was a fantastic race where Antonio Samarco, in the only McLaren in the field, ended up taking the checkered flag. So that was a very interesting race. We've also got Weekend Warriors, Spec Racer Fords, and the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Series will be here on Apex Racing TV on July the 23rd. I believe the Formula Fords will be racing at, they'll be racing at Fuji, while the Spec Racer Fords will be racing at Alton Park, and of course here, the Radical Racing Challenge here on Apex Racing TV will return on Friday, as it usually does, for next races, the next series race at Silverstone. That'll be a very interesting race, very historic track, obviously, just hosted the British Grand Prix a couple weeks ago. And I think we'll have to touch on that before we end tonight's broadcast. Silverstone, a track somewhat similar to this, as you heard Jorge Gonzaga mention, how the track might be, and the track and the racing might be similar, where you don't see too much slipstreaming, and you also see a lot of tire management come into an effect. So for next week, what are you expecting there, JR?
Yeah, I think those are some great insights from Jorge, and Silverstone is definitely gained, rightfully so, a reputation as a tire torture track. You really have to be conscious of not burning everything up at the beginning. You have to conserve your tires to last for the entire race, and really for the same reasons. A lot of long, kind of grindy tire screaming, sweeping corners, and also some very hard braking zones and low speed corners that tend to be hard on the front. So Silverstone is definitely a technical track. It's difficult, and tire management will no doubt be playing a role.
I think the biggest thing that'll come into an effect next week at Silverstone is just going to be the run going into turn 1. We've seen sometimes in the series how a interesting and definitely short run coming into the first corner can play an strange effect into some of these races. We saw some incidents at the first corner at the Nordschleife, which has the shortest run into turn 1 from the starting grid of any track that we race on, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see how that might come into an effect next week at Silverstone. If you'd like to join us there, you can either tune in by watching us here on Apex Racing TV next Friday, or you can actually race on track and have your name and your driving talent shown here on Apex Racing TV. Again, we follow the top split on the iRacing service for the official Radical Racing Challenge here on Apex Racing TV. And it'll be interesting to see what the entry list is next week, and I'm certainly looking forward to the racing action we put on next Friday. So for myself, Ron Mons, J.R. Gregory joining me as he usually does in the commentary booth, and Joshua Wilkie doing an awesome job in the production hauler. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be putting these broadcasts on. So for myself, Ron Mons, I say thank you all for tuning in, and I hope to see you next Friday. Bye-bye.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.